Happy New Year, everybody. Welcome to GM Joel's Chess Week Recap on ICC. We'll start the year off with a bang, as I have some great action from the World Rapid Championship and a little extra bonus from the World Blitz, both tournaments held in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. I can say with authority that sometimes it feels like there's no counterplay for old men. But don't tell that to Vichy Anand, who at age 48 is the World Rapid champion. He tallied 10.5 out of 15 and won a playoff match over Vladimir Fedoseev to take the title.
Vishwanathan Anand is the new World Rapid champion, having won the King Salman Championship here in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. Anand, what are your feelings after winning the title?
Oh, I'm just unbelievably happy. This was so unexpected. I mean, I won many World Rapid titles, but recently I had the feeling it was slipping away, and honestly, I came here just hoping for a good performance. I was not even thinking that I could win, and it's such a pleasant surprise.
Okay, between the games you were checking your computer. Were you preparing for the games or just relaxing?
I was trying to prepare, but in general we had 5 minutes between the pairings and the game, so it was more a way of keeping myself occupied, because otherwise in half an hour you walk here, you walk there, and you get a bit bored. And I felt that last time in previous events these breaks were breaking my focus. So this time I tried to keep a computer and do something and occupy myself, and it seems to have worked.
You have beaten Magnus earlier in the tournament, but he made a comeback and he was in competition until the very last round. Can you point what was the turning game for you in this championship when you were certain that you can be finishing in the top?
Well, obviously yesterday's win against him was a very big step. After that, I would say obviously the game against Grishchuk. This was crucial because it meant that I would be in the top. I mean, still, the last round I didn't know in what was Boo's plan, but since he went for the draw, that meant I was guaranteed shed first, and I'm very happy that I played the tiebreak very well.
Okay, tomorrow starts the Blitz Championship. Since you were a very young player, known as a very talented speed chess player. What are the expectations?
I don't know. Same, I guess. I hope to do well, and yes, I've also won World Blitz Championships before, but it was a while ago. Anyway, I will try my best, and like the Rapid, something nice can happen.
Thank you, and good luck.
All right, let's start by showing an awesome cheap shot Vichy used to take down English GM Luke McShane in round 7. So this is the position after move 50. White has just played, I think, Queen F2 to F4, which actually isn't a very good move. Anand has had some pressure for a while. In this position, the objectively best move for black is queen takes queen. And the reason is that white would love to take this with the knight, but then rook takes b4, and the knight is not in the square. So the pawn queens and the white b pawn can't run fast enough. So after queen takes queen, white has to take with a pawn, and then black can play rook b3, nice move cutting off the king on the third rank, and then black is ready to play king g6, king f5, and start attacking these pawns. And two pieces seem like should be better than a rook, but not really. The presence of the a pawns is a real problem as white has to constantly protect that pawn. So black has a clear advantage. But Anand could not resist this move, queen e6. Now, objectively, if white plays knight e3, he can survive, and it looks kind of risky. But the point is that white has this move queen f5 check, trading queens that he's threatening. And the thing is, knight and f5 is actually in the square of the a pawn, so the rook takes b4s don't work. If the knight is on f5, it can get back in time. So knight e3 seems to be good enough for a draw. But I have to say that a friend posted this position on Facebook, and I looked at the position. I also thought Queen F3 looked like a strong move for White. It hits the pawn in H5 and prepares to put the knight in F4. And but this is where Vichy strikes with Queen H3 check. Boom. King takes H3, Rook H1. Nice mate. The funny thing about it is that I didn't see this coming either, even though I landed the same checkmate on Boris Kogan way back in 1981 in the U.S. Championship, and poor Boris just looked up at the sky and like, why me, So I imagine Luke felt that way. So it was a good omen for Vichy, to have these cheap mates fall in his lap, and the good tournament he went undefeated. I don't know. I don't think anybody else in the tournament managed that. It's very hard and rapid. Now, of course, the road to any title goes through Magnus Carlsen. So Vichy had to deal with him, and he took him down in round 9. So let's have a look at that one next. Okay, we're going to pick up the action after the 27th move. Knight has just come into B3, attack the rook, and objectively best is probably rook C2. And the game is somewhat even. Both sides have their pluses and minuses. Carlsen went for a very interesting move, knight E6. And now probably Anand could profitably throw in the move A5, chasing the queen away. And this unpins his knight in a lot of key variations. It's probably stronger, but he took the rook right away. And Carlsen took back, and again A5 is possible even in this position. The reason why it's good to drive the queen away is because Black would like to stick this knight to E4 and block out the bishop, but it's not possible without chasing the queen because his rook will hang. So if he chases away the queen, he's able to put the knight into E4. Not decisive or anything, but it seems to be good. Now, this is a very interesting position, and this is the kind of thing that I find very intriguing. Most players watching this think like, okay, my rook is attacked, I move the rook. But if Black moves the rook, White can take this pawn on G7, and the king side becomes very vulnerable. So, this is where the grandmasters, they're not overly wedded to being, up in exchange or down in exchange. And Anand plays knight C8, offering a queen trade. So now if White takes on G7, it's not a big deal because they're going to have an endgame. If he can take the queen or take the rook first. Let's say he takes. Black can be happy to trade. And White has a bishop pair, but Black has a lot of play on this D pawn. In fact, the D pawn is pretty much surrounded. White can only hope to really get some tactics around it, but Black is certainly okay there. So he can't take back the exchange without trading queens. So he tries queen takes B5, and this may be the best move. And rook takes D5. Bishop takes D5, and now, by the way, bishop takes D5. I'm not sure that was the best move. White could also play queen B4. This is kind of finesse. It's not so easy to see in a rapid game. And okay, just play the position exchange down. Black is better with the exchange, but White has the bishop pair. So he took the rook, and now if bishop takes, knight takes rook could be very dangerous after queen e4. But White can also just play knight f4, and the bishop has to retreat, either drop the f5 pawn or the c4 pawn, and White has a clear advantage. But much stronger to take with the rook, as Vichy did. Queen b4, and now knight d6. And now the key moment in the game, White has to play knight f4 This is not entirely obvious because black can play queen e4 here. But the thing is that that lineup is not decisive. There isn't any knockout on that long diagonal. The computer says f4. Black should play, and complications leads to equality apparently. So black could play this, but it's not winning. However, knight to c5 was a blunder because now, at the exchange sacrifice in queen e4, now it's over. And in fact, Carlsen resigned, and the problem is queen on c5 because he has to put king f1 to run. Then black can check, and then he can take the queen or take the rook either way, and he comes out a whole piece ahead. So that's why Carlsen gave up. Knight c5 was a blunder. But a very interesting tactical skirmish there, even before that blunder, giving the exchange and giving back the exchange, and two top grandmasters fighting for the initiative in rapid chess. So it's pretty good stuff. Okay, now Carlsen recovered from that. He bounced back as well as he always does. The next round, he took down Ian Nepomniachtchi, and the Nepomniachtchi, as we will see, was a big factor in this tournament. So this was a big win. Carlsen making his way back, which he did a couple of times this tournament. Remember, he lost the first round to Boo again. So let's have a look at the last part of that game as well. Carlsen against Nepomniachtchi. Okay, so we're going to pick up the action after move 37. And you can see Carlsen, he has the good knight, bad bishop, weak black pawns everywhere, strategically almost like, master versus amateur, what he's done. But his king is exposed, so he has to take care in the execution, and actually he does not, as it turns out. Now, here he has a chance to kind of end things with the move d4. Probably he wasn't looking in that direction, but it's a strong move. Black checks with the queen don't do anything. King comes to g3. The key checks are covered. If black takes, knight f6, king g7, otherwise either mate or the bishop goes to check, and queen e5. This is probably what Carlsen missed, is that his queen is actually in perfect position, because if black starts giving checks, the king can just run all the way up to h5 because h2 is protected. The king is beautiful there, and the queen and knight combination here is deadly. Black is losing material and or getting mated. So d4 was very strong. He plays king g3. Okay, that's standard kind of move. King h7, h3. King h4 right away might have been more accurate, but he has a basic winning plan of tucking his king on h4 and bringing in the queen, and then if necessary he can bring the knight back to g3 to block checks while the queen penetrates decisively. So bishop c8, and this is where he goes wrong. He plays queen e8. He could take this pawn on c5, or he could continue this mission of king h4, and then his queen would be ready to come in. But he played queen e8, and he rushed this move, and he missed this cheap shot by Nepom. Okay, necessity is the mother of invention. And if white takes the bishop, queen e1, and it's perpetual because the knight h5 can't help out at all. So Magnus plays king f2, and he's got to somehow reorient this, because his knight is not helping. And here, Nepom misses a chance for a draw with queen to d4. And if king e2, well, d takes c4 is probably the best move, because if white takes back, black can now give the check on e5, as the white king can't go to f3 because of actually he can. Why can't he go to bishop d5, pawn takes Looks like he can even do that too. But I guess black will play. Actually, I'm not sure why that's a draw. Come to think of it, but I think black has a draw with Queen C3, and this is a little bit surprising. This is not an easy thing to see, but the idea is that if white takes the bishop, then the check comes on c2, and there's no way for the white king to run out, and the knight can't block anything. So you might think that, okay, now knight f4, and this looks perfect, but black can check and play d4. Yeah, this is a great draw, setting up setting up queen e3, also setting up bishop d5 check in some case, like knight g2, bishop d5. If white takes, queen e3 check, king g2, queen d2 check, not letting the knight interpose. If king comes to g3, now black has a check on e3, not e1, queen e1, king h2, and then the knight will be able to block the check. White will slip out, but queen e3, and if king h4, queen e1, king h5, not getting out, queen e5, and more checks. So there was a forced draw there, but okay, I'm sure there wasn't a lot of time. Queen b2, king f3, but now white has time to bring the knight back, and the knight shields the king. Queen takes d3, and then he has to make one more good move. Not pawn takes bishop, queen to d4, and again the same idea of not allowing the knight to interpose. But white just makes one more safety move, knight e2, because the bishop is trapped. And now he finally gets to take the bishop, and Nepom struggles for a few moves, down a piece, and he doesn't even give the g4 pawn. And queen d7, that forces mate. So game Carlsen kind of dominated, but then there at the end, you know, that he was tricked by bishop e6, and then he needed to actually get lucky after that. But he got his bearings, and he seemed like he was poised to go all the way after defeating Fedoseev in round 12. Fedoseev, who was leading most of the way. We'll talk more about that later. So Carlsen entered the last round tied for first with Anand at 10-4. Anand took a quick draw with Carlsen's nemesis Bu, while Magnus suffered a shock loss to Alexander Grishuk. It meant that Vichy went through the tournament without a loss, okay? But meanwhile, Fedoseev moved up with a victory over Vladislav Artemiev, who I understand is a very big specialist in Blitz. And Nepom, he made it a trio on top at 10.5 by winning against Wang Hao. And we're going to take a look at the last bit of that one. All right, we're going to pick up the action at move 46. And Nepom just won a clear pawn earlier in the game, but okay, Wang kept playing, and Nepom created this past h pawn, but not a he's got a bad bishop. You know, it's okay, it's active, but for the end game, it's not clear how white's supposed to break through here. So Nepom, I'm not sure what else he would do. He decides to play rook takes c5, and strangely, Wang makes a big mistake here because he actually should be okay if he takes with a d pawn. And let's say white plays bishop c6, and black can play rook back to e6. And if rook d8, then black could play rook d6 or even king g7 right away. In fact, if white plays bishop d5, I think that black could force a trade of rooks, rook e8, rook d7, rook e7. So it seems that after d takes c5, there's no breakthrough that it's just a draw. I mean, the white's not going to lose because the position is too blocked up for black to win, but I don't think he's going to have a breakthrough either. But Wang took with the b pawn, and he must have really underestimated b6 and rook b1. It's really interesting because either way, black is up in exchange, but this just opens things up a little bit. Even though white gives up a pawn for the moment, he's ready to take this pawn in b6, and then he's going to start attacking all these pawns, and he's going to get d6, he's going to get a5, and the exchange doesn't mean very much. The bishop on d5 is a monster, and the black rooks just can't break into the game. So Wang tried to sacrifice the exchange, rook d5, and that would do him no good to play rook b7. I'd probably start with c4, just cementing that, and then he could continue by bringing the rook to the e file and penetrating, or maybe rook b3 first and then f4 and get all that going and winning very easily. So black tried rook e3 rather, and white just started taking pawns. Check. And if the king goes to h6, white can just go and eat the pawn on f6, and probably if he wants the one on g5 as well, and black will never really get enough counterplay going on the other side. But king going to the back rank was not a solution, because very accurate move, rook c7. Okay, you make an accurate move, you can end all resistance, because white wants to push d6, d7, but by playing rook c7 first, now if black goes behind, then white just takes c5 and takes a5 as well, just takes everything. But if black doesn't play rook d3, then the pawn will come right through, white will win the rook for it. The black king can't really help much, because if it comes over, white can push the h pawn through, and can't dance two weddings at the same time. So rook c7, black resigned. So it was a threesome on top, but poor Nepom was unfortunately the odd man out on tie breaks, which was the average rating of the field. He had the weakest field. He was the slowest starter. I played a very strong field, but the other guys just played absolute crushers. So it was a tie break between Anand, a playoff rather, between Anand and Fedoseev, 2-game Blitz playoff. Now Fedoseev, he'd been a front runner throughout the event. He started with 6.5 out of 7. And but he was knocked out of the lead by that loss to Carlsen, the long Carlsen type game. Very important for the standings. But he won that last one, so he got to the playoff. And then he dropped the first playoff game, and he found himself in a desperation situation in the second game. And he played with desperation, but it was not enough to knock off Anand. So let's have a look at that second playoff game next. Okay, so Fedoseev goes for a flank opening. And Anand was offering kind of Grunfeld or Catalan if white had played c4, but instead he plays, if white had played d4, but after c4, d4. Okay, this shows that, it can be a good strategy. Even when you want to draw, you don't necessarily have to, let your opponent control the board and just try to trade off pieces. So Anand plays aggressively. Of course, he doesn't mind repeating moves, so white goes in a different direction. This bishop a3 is probably a dead end after queen a5, and then black protects the bishop with rook d8, and actually the white pieces don't really have any place to go, so white probably needed to play a little differently in the last couple of moves, but of course must-win situation, so Fedoseev just completely speculates with knight takes d4 and queen f4. So nice little skewer on the rooks, but unfortunately black can defend in many possible ways. Even rook on 1 to b6 works, because if c5, queen takes c5, rook c1, black can play queen f5, and that defends the bishop. So he plays queen c7, c5, and there isn't actually a reason why black can't take this pawn, I don't think. Rook c1, just staying on the rook. Queen a3 probably is wise. I don't see any follow-up. But he plays rook d7, and this is why I like the game, because there's a nice little skirmish here. Fedoseev just, totally trying to confuse the issue, c6. And, probably Vichy should play rook d6. There's really no answer to that. Black will consolidate in a few moves. But he took the queen, and now c takes d7. Okay. So the queen comes back, and now rook e8 check. All right, black doesn't have to take it. King h7, queen. So he actually wins a tempo by king h7. Takes, now bishop f5. All right, so they get to this end game. Queen a4 probably wasn't the best move, but because of this, queen e1 was better. But in any case, I don't think white is really in any position to win this position. And Anand, very aware of the situation, trades rooks. And then he doesn't worry about defending this pawn. He just pushes. And probably if black pushes right away, he can even win the game because of check. He can play king g8, queen d5. He can play king h8, something like this. Queen e4, g6, queen b7, then queen g7, and then you start everything. Queen has to come all the way back to b1, and then black has a winning queen ending with a pawn on the 7th rank. But he doesn't care about that. He just plays queen e1, king g2, and d2. And I believe that the game was agreed to a draw. I've actually seen a win for black and a draw in different sources. But what I think happened is there was some confusion because this won the match for Anand. But actually, queen f5 check is white has perpetual. King g8, queen d5, and white can check up and down the d file. But in any case, Vichy did not need to win the game, so he becomes the world rapid champion, age 48, and he wasn't quite done, as we're going to see. But next, we're going to get into the Blitz. We'll get into the Blitz just a little bit, but first, just one more game from this event. It was one that did not have a big part, a big impact on the standings, but contained maybe the loveliest move in the tournament. Probably better than Queen H3, although that was certainly good for grins. But Karyakin Esipenko, this is a cool game. Last week we beat up on Esipenko a little bit. In the last tournament, he had a couple of losses, but it's important to note that he's just 15 years old. He's 15 years old and 25-60 or so, which is not bad. And let's check out what he does to Karyakin. Tears him apart. We'll have a look at that one next. Okay, so Karyakin playing white, and he plays two knights against Caro-Kann, which has become pretty popular lately, but Esipenko kicks it old school with bishop g4, bishop d2. Now, I think that this is interesting line for white to play, because very often white will castle queenside and go for a pawn storm on the king side, and it can lead to a very double-edged game. But it's very interesting how Esipenko plays. He plays just a very direct move, queen b6. Okay, I'm attacking your b pawn, put up or shut up. So white castles, and now he pushes the pawn. And what's interesting is that, he does not stop for knight bd7. So then now this knight has a possibility of coming out to c6, although it doesn't, believe it or not. Here, Karyakin tries some action with e5. Knight comes to b4. And I don't know, maybe white should take it, but I suppose he'll miss that dark square bishop. King b1, knight d7. So knight ends up going here because he decides to bring this knight back to c6. And now this is an interesting moment because, like a lot of you will say, well, why doesn't he take this pawn? And it seems that he can take it. And maybe white would play f4, f5. Black can play e5. Something like this happens. Black wins a pawn, but basically if he's going to win the game, I think he's going to go c4 and attack the king anyway. Because I'm not sure just how much that extra pawn is worth. This is very nice long diagonal now for the light square bishop. But Osipenko just plays this in a much more practical manner. He spits on that pawn. He doesn't need it. And he goes for the attack. So he opens up his bishop. He opens up knight coming to c5. And basically, white doesn't really have any pieces in position to defend. The knight on h5 is away from the action. All right, so he takes bishop a3, bishop c1, knight c5. Okay, now if black hurries with knight a4, white defends everything with queen b3, and in fact would be winning. But first, this is a clearance sacrifice, but also a sacrifice to block off the queen. So white takes, and now knight comes to a4. No queen b3. Also no queen f2 defense. So he has to defend with the rook. Very awkward. He can't defend it with the queen. Knight d4. He still has to move the queen. Not so many squares. Check. King a1. And it's gold coins time. That's what they said about that old Marshall game when he played a similar move. Boom. They said that spectators threw gold coins onto the board. Well, there you go. Queen b3, threatening mate. Can't take the queen because of knight takes b3. Very nice mate with 3 minor pieces. Actually, you don't even need the bishop. Just to mate with 2 knights. Very cool. So Karyakin played on a little bit. But it's very easy for black because after this 4 series of moves, he just wins the queen for the knight. So white only has a couple of bishops a couple of minor pieces for the queen, obviously hopeless. But Osipenko finishes in a bit of style with the move b5. And if the rook takes it, then black will can win on the b file with king c7, and then rook coming to b8, and if necessary, rinse, lather, repeat. The other rook comes to the b file to win. So b5 he took with the pawn, and then rook d4. And if white doesn't want to just give away his bishop by moving it now, then black's going to play queen c3 and rook d4 and force mate there. So that's that. Karyakin just limping to move 29. Really, it was all over on move 22 after queen b3. So a nice win for Osipenko, showing his talent. 15 years old, and he destroys Karyakin. Not bad at all. Okay, now we'll move on to the Blitz. We won't really have too much coverage because I thought generally more interesting games in the Rapid. But a lot of weird things do happen in Blitz. And Magnus Carlsen, his Blitz tournament started out even more strangely than his Rapid tournament, losing to Boo in the first round. The first round he played in the Blitz, he played in Inarkiev. And you got to see what happens in this game. It's kind of surreal. So we'll just have that game from the Blitz, Karyakin against Inarkiev. Okay, so Carlsen. Well, he has a sense of humor in these games, but especially in Blitz, And so a3. So he goes for a wing gambit. Although, I don't know that this is necessarily the best way for black to play. I mean, of course, he could decline by playing b6 or d6. White doesn't necessarily gain anything by b4, or he could have played e6 to be able to take with the bishop. But he goes and takes with the knight, and white gets this big center. And what's really interesting is in this position, I put on Komodo, who already gives white an advantage, and it just puts to rest that old notion that computers just want to grab material. They're very happy to have the initiative. So I don't know if Carlsen, I don't know if there's any preparation involved, but he just goes with a knight and takes his pawn, and he gets a little bit of a better game. But then I don't think he makes the most of it. He should take with the queen, and that's effective because if black trades, knight takes the bishop, and the pawn on b7 is hanging. But after knight takes, bishop d7, suddenly it wasn't so easy for white to follow up. And because of that, Magnus decided to trade queens with knight b5. But now his king is in the middle of the board, and that can be okay if he gets his pieces developed very quickly. But here Anarkiev had a nice chance with bishop c5, just not worrying about that pawn, and then knight f6. Okay, and just getting pieces out very quickly. And black is going to be able to castle, and he's pawned down for the moment, but probably has the better game. Certainly an easier game to play after castling, but he never does get the castle. He plays bishop c6, and now white is getting ready for a big check, rook e1, and he gets this just in time. So after knight e7, he doesn't have to move the rook. He gets to trade off the bishop, and now black can't castle. Still, he probably should put the king on f8, just safe, but he plays ambitiously with the king in the middle, which really kind of sets himself up for some tactics. But he still is not that badly off until the move knight d5, and now he's busted after this move, knight takes and bishop check, and he tries to save the exchange with king b6, but he misses this nice desperado tactic, rook takes b7, and so now black takes on b7, bishop takes e8, and white's going to be up a couple of pawns. So Anarkiev comes up with an amazing move here, and I can tell you about it. I can't actually put it on the board. ICC does not allow such foolery, and neither does ChessBase, so it's not officially a move. But black played knight e3. See, it bounces back on me. Knight e3 check. Yes, he played that. Yes, it's illegal. And yes, Magnus Carlsen forgot that he'd already put Anarkiev in check. Maybe he was afraid he'd accidentally take the king. That's the funny thing. I think taking the king would be an illegal. You actually lose if you take the king now in the FIDE rules rather than saying illegal move. So I guess Carlsen did something better than taking the king. He answered knight e3 check with king d3. But the bizarre thing was Anarkiev jumped up and said, "I win! Illegal move!" And Carlsen says, "What are you talking about?" He says, I'm in check, and you just moved, and the position is illegal. You moved, and it's illegal, so I win." And I think that he actually managed to convince the arbiter of this for a while. But as the matter was, discussed, they went to the headquarters in New York or Toronto or wherever they do it in the sports. And upon further review, they decided that it's quite ridiculous. You can't win. You can't win by when you created the illegal position. So Anarkiev was eventually told just to continue the game after knight e3, king d3. From that position. But the thing is, that makes it even worse, because then when he takes the rook, the bishop takes rook check, and his knight is hanging. So, there isn't really any point to continuing the game, but he could have resigned the game, which would have been more appropriate. Instead, he kind of left the game under protest, and this is not does not reflect well on in Arkiev. I don't know him personally. I've seen some people write that he's a good guy, but he was out of control in this game, but ended up with a 0. And so Carlsen, went on from there, and he did have a few lulls in the event. At one point, he drew 4 games in a row, and I think he lost a game. I think he lost to Yu Yang Yi, but he turned on the Jets on the last day. 8.5. He had a stretch of 8.5 out of 9, which brought him into the last round, with having already clinched first place. And his final tally of 16 out of 21 placed him a 1.5 ahead of Karyakin, who was an especially strong Blitz player, and that old man again, Vishy Anand.
We have the new World Blitz champion, Magnus Carlsen, here with us. My congratulations. How do you feel about it? What are your emotions?
I'm obviously extremely happy. Yesterday was a very difficult day for me, but today everything went, beyond expectations. So, very happy.
Yeah, I mean, what this title means for you. I mean, last year you were not so successful to win the event, but this year you finally grabbed the title back.
It means a lot, especially after I lost the last round in the rapid from a leading position. Then it makes the whole difference for me when I look back upon these tournaments and this year. So it's a massive win.
Which games were the most interesting in this event? Which games do you consider you were lucky in, maybe?
No, I mean, I think like yesterday I was lucky in many games. I was lost in almost every game. But today I think I played quite well. I kept on putting pressure and I barely blundered. Obviously, an early key today was the game with Karyakin. Then after I won that, I knew that I had a very good chance of winning, obviously.
Yeah, and you said that the title is very important for you, but also they have quite a good prize fund here. Do you have a plan how to spend them or invest, maybe?
I haven't thought about that, but I'm very grateful to the organizers and FIDE for establishing such a great event with also good prizes.
Now, what can you say about the organization itself? And I know that you had a chance to visit also National Museum.
I'm very happy with the way my family and I have been treated here, and I think my family has had a great time going shopping and relaxing. So we're all very happy, and we'd like to come back, I think.
Yeah, actually, you mentioned you would like to come back, and you know that FIDE established a message that they would like to organize Peace and Friendship World Rapid and Blitz Championship next year, where everybody will be welcomed. Are you supporting the idea?
Yeah, obviously, I think everybody who's qualified should be able to play regardless of nationality and anything. So I'm hoping that will happen next year.
Yeah. Thank you so much, and once again, congratulations, Magnus.
Thank you.
So, tie for second, and in the Blitz, first place in the Rapid. Not a bad week for Vish. All right, that's it from Saudi Arabia. Next week, we will likely see some action from the traditional holiday events like the Rilton Cup and Hastings. I played in both of them. They're quite a lot of fun. Maybe something from the Pan American Intercollegiate. We'll see. Well, I hope you enjoyed the show. I'm Grandmaster Joel Benjamin, wishing you all again a very happy and healthy new year, which will hopefully be full of watching my videos over and over again. So please join me next time on GM Joel's Chess Week Recap on ICC. Bye.